My name is Abigail, and for the past 2.5 years, I've been watching my husband, Jonathan, slowly fade away. When we first got the diagnosis of stomach cancer, I remember feeling like the floor had disappeared beneath my feet. My heart plummeted into darkness as reality crashed around me. Jonathan was only 40, successful as a co-founder and CFO of his software company, and we had a beautiful 8-year-old son, Oliver. We were supposed to have decades ahead of us. The one small blessing in this nightmare was that John's financial success meant we could afford the best treatment available. My stomach nodded with desperate hope as we flew to specialists across the country, tried experimental therapies, and spared no expense. But as the months dragged on, it became clear that all this treatment was just buying time, not offering a cure. I watched helplessly as each new treatment brought briefer moments of improvement. Through it all, John's parents, Marion and Walter, were our rocks. They lived just 15 minutes away and stepped in without hesitation when things got tough. The warmth of their unwavering support was like a blanket around my shoulders during the coldest days. "Abby, we'll pick Oliver up from school today," Marion would say on days when John was scheduled for treatment. "Don't worry about dinner either. I've made extra lasagna." Each offer came with a gentle squeeze of my hand, a silent promise of continued support. Oliver would often tug on my sleeve when I tucked him in at night, his eyes wide with hope and fear. "Mom, when is Dad going to get better?" My heart would shatter anew each time, throat tightening around words I couldn't bear to speak. How do you tell a child that his father is dying? So I just stroked his hair and said, "The doctors are trying their best, sweetie." My own parents, on the other hand, were a different story. My mother, Patricia, and my father, Henry, lived just as close as John's parents, but they might as well have been on another planet. The familiar sting of their indifference never dulled, no matter how often I felt it. I asked my mother, "Mom, can you pick up Oliver from school today? John has had a bad reaction to the chemo, and Marion has a doctor's appointment." Then she answered, "Oh Abby, I'm so sorry, but we promised to help your sister with her apartment hunting today. You know how Vanessa gets when she's stressed." It was always Vanessa. It had been that way my entire life. The pattern was familiar but no less painful each time. When I was 7, my parents missed my school play because Vanessa had a cold. When I graduated high school, they left right after the ceremony to get to Vanessa's dance recital, even though she was just in the ensemble. I'd gotten used to it over the years. Jonathan became my family, and his parents treated me more like a daughter than my own ever did. Walter had even helped me revise my first freelance editing contracts when I transitioned from publishing house work during John's illness. So when John's condition took a turn for the worse last month, I braced myself for the end, surrounded by the family that had chosen me. The night Jonathan died, I was holding his hand in our bedroom, where we'd set up home hospice care. His breathing had become shallow hours before, and the hospice nurse had warned me it wouldn't be long. I felt each precious breath like a countdown, memorizing every detail of his face. "Abby," he whispered, his voice barely audible, "take care of Ollie. Tell him to keep building those model planes. You're the strongest person I know." Those were his last words, a final gift of love that broke my heart and fortified it simultaneously. I sat there for hours after, still holding his hand as it grew cold, unable to process that my partner of 12 years was gone. The hospice nurse gently confirmed what I already knew before stepping out to give me privacy. Marion and Walter arrived within 20 minutes of my call, their faces etched with the same grief that was consuming me. "We're here, sweetheart," Marion said, wrapping her arms around me, her voice breaking with shared pain. "We'll always be here," Marion said. That night, I sent a text to my mother, "Jonathan passed away tonight." Her response came an hour later, "Oh, that's terrible. We'll call you tomorrow." No immediate call, no offer to come over, no question about how Oliver and I were doing. Just hollow words. But I was too numb to care. There was a funeral to plan, a son to console, and a life to somehow piece back together. The days after Jonathan's death passed in a blur of funeral arrangements, paperwork, and trying to explain to Oliver that his father wasn't coming home. My hands trembled each time I signed another document, grief washing over me in relentless waves. Marion and Walter were there every step of the way, handling calls to the funeral home when I couldn't form words and sitting with Oliver when he had questions I couldn't answer. Their steady presence anchored me when I felt I might drift away completely. The day before the funeral, I was drowning in details. The funeral home needed final decisions on the program, friends from John's tech company were asking about the live stream setup, distant relatives were calling for directions, and I still needed to pick up Oliver's suit. I hadn't slept more than 2 hours at a stretch since Jonathan died, my body aching with exhaustion. I need to ask my parents to watch Oliver, I told Marian as we sat at my kitchen table surrounded by sympathy cards and her homemade soup that I couldn't taste. You and Walter are already doing so much, I said to Marian. I drove Oliver to my parents' house, rehearsing what I would say, my stomach nodding with each mile. When we arrived, my mother opened the door wearing a light jacket, purse already in hand, her face falling when she saw us. Abby, this isn't a good time, she said, not even inviting us in. We're just heading out for our spa appointments. Mom, please. It's just for a few hours. I have to finalize everything for the funeral. My voice cracked as I fought back tears of frustration. We've had these spa reservations for weeks, my father cut in, appearing behind my mother. We can't cancel now. They have a strict cancellation policy, he added. Before I could argue further, they both stepped outside, locking the door behind them. We really have to go, my mother said firmly, avoiding Oliver's confused gaze. I'm sure you can find someone else, she said. They hurried to their car without so much as a to Oliver, who stood there confused and hurt, his small hand gripping mine tighter. Once they drove away, I called my friend Rachel, the tightness in my chest easing slightly when she immediately agreed to watch him. Of course I'll take him, Abby. Bring him right over. I've got cookies and we'll build that new plane model John got him, Rachel said. After dropping Oliver at Rachel's house, curiosity got the better of me. I took a detour past my parents' house on my way home, anger bubbling up inside me. Their lights were on, and Vanessa's red BMW was parked in the driveway. So that's the important spa appointment, I muttered to myself, a bitter laugh escaping my lips. They weren't busy at all. They just preferred helping Vanessa to supporting me, even now, when I was crumbling under the weight of my grief. That evening, I sent a message to our family group chat. Jonathan's funeral is at 11 a.m. on Thursday at Greenwood Chapel. Service will be followed by a small reception. There will be a live stream for those who can't attend in person. I watched as the read receipts appeared next to my parents' and Vanessa's names. My heart sank as minutes turned to hours with no reply. The night before the funeral, anxiety drove me to call my mother directly, my fingers trembling as I dialed. Mom, you saw my message about the funeral tomorrow, right? It starts at 11, I said to my mother. There was a pause on the line. Oh Abby, I'm sorry, but we won't be able to make it. Vanessa has arranged this VIP networking event at Emilio's for her career advancement. It's at noon, and we've already committed. She needs us there to introduce us to some important industry contacts. I nearly dropped the phone, my knees weakening beneath me. Mom, this is Jonathan's funeral we're talking about. Jonathan, who paid for the repairs on your house 3 years ago when the roof collapsed. Jonathan, who has been part of our family for over a decade, I said. That was a long time ago, Abby, my mother replied coldly. We need to focus on the living, not the dead. Vanessa needs our support right now for her career growth, she added. Before I could respond, she hung up. I immediately dialed Vanessa's number, my hand shaking with anger and disbelief, my breath coming in short gasps. Hello, she answered, sounding annoyed that I'd interrupted her evening. Vanessa, Mom says you're having some networking event tomorrow at the same time as Jonathan's funeral. Can't you reschedule, or at least push it back so they can attend the service first, I asked. No way, she scoffed. I can't change the reservation now. Everyone's already confirmed, and this networking opportunity is a big deal for my personal brand. It's not like I can reschedule a funeral party or whatever. A funeral party? I repeated, my voice rising as heat flushed my face. My husband is dead, Vanessa. The man who paid for your entire college education at that brand-name university you're always bragging about, I said. That was ages ago, she dismissed. Look, my career networking is more important than some depressing funeral. People die every day. My Instagram followers are expecting content from this event. Then she hung up too. I stood there in my kitchen, phone still in hand, utterly stunned by the callousness. As if to twist the knife further, my phone pinged with a message from my mother, stop pressuring your sister. Her networking event is more important than a funeral. She's worked hard for this opportunity and needs to maintain her social media presence. I stood there in my kitchen, phone still in hand, utterly stunned by the callousness. The day of Jonathan's funeral dawned bright and clear, a mockery of the darkness I felt inside. My chest ached with each breath as I prepared to say my final. The service was beautiful in its simplicity. John had never been one for elaborate displays, and the modest chapel was filled with people who had genuinely cared for him, including colleagues, business partners, friends, neighbors, and family. His family, anyway. The online livestream quietly captured the service for John's team members across the country who couldn't attend in person. During the eulogy, my voice trembled as I spoke about Jonathan's generosity, his foresight, his kindness, and his unwavering devotion to our son. The words caught in my throat several times, but I pushed through, determined to honor him properly. Oliver sat between Marion and Walter, who held his hands as tears streamed down his face. His small shoulders shook with silent sobs that tore at my heart. After the service, several people approached me, offering condolences and asking about my parents' absence. "I was surprised not to see your folks," John's MIT roommate said, his brow furrowed with concern. "Are they ill?" he asked. "They had a prior commitment," I replied stiffly, my jaw clenching with the effort not to reveal more. Marion noticed my discomfort and smoothly steered the conversation elsewhere, her hand firm on my back. That night, after everyone had gone home, I sat alone in the living room surrounded by sympathy cards and flower arrangements. The house felt impossibly empty without Jonathan, the silence so loud it hurt. My phone buzzed with a text from Vanessa, "Hope the funeral went okay. Check out my Insta." Mom posted pics from my networking event. No condolences, no acknowledgement of what I'd just been through. Just a celebration of her accomplishment. I stared at the screen, feeling nothing but a hollow emptiness where anger should be. I turned off my phone without responding and went upstairs to check on Oliver. He was sleeping soundly, clutching the model airplane John had helped him build on his last birthday. I crawled into bed beside him, finding comfort in the steady rhythm of his breathing against the overwhelming silence of our new reality. For the next 10 days, I moved through life in a fog. Grief wrapped around me like a heavy cloak, making even the simplest tasks require enormous effort. Marion and Walter came by daily, bringing homemade food, taking Oliver to the park, helping me sort through Jonathan's belongings and digital accounts. My parents didn't call once, not to check on their grandson, not to see how I was holding up. Nothing but silence from the people who should have cared the most. 10 days after the funeral, I received a call from Jonathan's lawyer, Mr. Harrison. "Mrs. Montgomery, it's time to discuss Jonathan's will," he explained, his voice gentle but professional. He was exceptionally thorough in his preparations, as you might expect from someone with his background. "Would tomorrow afternoon work for the reading?" he asked. I agreed, my throat tightening at this final piece of John's planning, then called Marion and Walter to invite them. They'd been named in the will, of course, and Jonathan would have wanted them there. The next day, I received a text that made my stomach drop. "We'll be there for the will reading at 2. Mom." I stared at my phone in disbelief, anger flaring hot in my chest. How did they even know about it? Mr. Harrison arrived at our house at precisely 2 p.m., carrying a leather briefcase and wearing a somber expression that softened when he saw Oliver. "Your father spoke of you often," he told my son, shaking his small hand formally but with genuine warmth. "He was very proud of you and your model airplanes. He showed me pictures of them in his office." Oliver's face brightened momentarily at the mention of his beloved hobby. We all settled in the living room, me, Oliver, Marion and Walter, ready for what I expected to be a straightforward reading. Jonathan and I had discussed his wishes extensively during his illness, so there would be no surprises for me. But just as Mr. Harrison was about to begin, the doorbell rang, sending a wave of dread through me. "Are you expecting anyone else?" Marion asked, looking concerned. "Unfortunately, yes," I replied, my jaw tight as I went to answer the door. I nearly slammed it shut when I saw my parents and Vanessa standing on the porch, all wearing expressions of exaggerated sympathy that didn't reach their eyes. "What are you doing here?" I asked bluntly, blocking the doorway with my body. "We received your text about the reading," my mother said, trying to look past me into the house. "Jonathan wasn't a stranger to us, you know. As immediate family members, we have a legal right to be here," my father said. "A legal right?" I repeated incredulously, my fingers gripping the door frame. "You couldn't be bothered to come to his funeral, but you have a legal right to be at his will reading?" My father cleared his throat, straightening his designer tie. "Now, Abigail, there's no need to bring up old grievances. We're here to support you and ensure the family's interests are properly represented." "Support me? Family interests?" I laughed bitterly, the sound harsh even to my own ears. "That's rich," I said. But before I could shut the door, my mother gently but firmly pushed past me, with my father and Vanessa following close behind. "We're family," she said with practiced conviction, as if that explained everything. I stood there, stunned by their audacity as they made their way to the living room. Marian and Walter's faces darkened when they saw who had arrived, exchanging glances that spoke volumes. "What are they doing here?" Walter whispered when I returned, his normally kind voice tight with restraint. "I have no idea how they knew," I replied, my hand shaking with anger. "But I'm not going to make a scene in front of Oliver," I said. Mr. Harrison, ever the professional, merely raised an eyebrow before continuing. "Shall we proceed with the reading of the will?" he said. My parents and Vanessa sat on the couch opposite Marian and Walter, with Oliver beside me in an armchair. The tension in the room was suffocating, like a physical presence pressing against my chest. "Before I begin the formal reading, Mr. Montgomery prepared a brief video message for this occasion," Mr. Harrison said, setting up his tablet on the coffee table. Jonathan's face appeared on the screen, thinner than his healthy days but with clear eyes and a determined expression. My heart clenched at the sight of him, and I heard Oliver's sharp intake of breath beside me. After the video message, which brought tears to everyone's eyes except my parents and sister, Mr. Harrison began the formal reading. "I, Jonathan William Montgomery, being of sound mind, declare this to be my last will and testament," Mr. Harrison began, reading from the formal document. Jonathan had left everything meticulously organized, as was his nature. To his parents, he left $200,000, enough to ensure their comfortable retirement and to thank them for their unwavering support throughout our marriage and his illness. "We never expected," Marian began, her voice breaking as Walter held her hand tightly. Then came the main provisions. To me, he left our Boston home, 2 apartments downtown that I hadn't even known he owned, his share in the software company, and $400,000 in liquid assets. I sat there, stunned by the extent of Jonathan's planning and foresight. He'd insured Oliver and I would be financially secure, no matter what happened to his company after his death. "The downtown properties generate significant monthly rental income," Mr. Harrison explained, opening a folder with detailed financial statements. "Jonathan purchased them as strategic investments 3 years ago as part of his long-term family security planning." I sat there, stunned by the extent of John's foresight. My throat tightened with emotion as I realized how thoroughly he'd insured Oliver and I would be financially secure, no matter what happened. Even while fighting cancer, he'd been thinking of our future. As Mr. Harrison continued reading about Jonathan's digital assets and the trust fund for Oliver's education, I noticed my mother's expression change from feigned sympathy to undisguised interest. Vanessa sat up straighter, suddenly paying attention, her eyes calculating as the lawyer detailed the extent of John's estate. The shift in their demeanor made my skin crawl. When the lawyer finished, my mother clapped her hands together, her voice dripping with false enthusiasm. "Well, this is wonderful news, isn't it, Abby? You're quite well positioned now for the future," she said. The room fell silent. Marian and Walter stared at her in shock, their faces mirroring the disbelief I felt. "I mean," my mother continued, oblivious to the tension or perhaps simply not caring, "with 2 apartments and all that money, you can certainly help establish a sustainable family support system now. Vanessa has been struggling with the down payment on her condo, haven't you, dear?" Vanessa nodded eagerly, her eyes gleaming with entitlement. "It's just impossible in this market, and you have 2 investment properties just sitting there generating passive income." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. My husband wasn't even cold in his grave, and they were already eyeing his assets he'd carefully built to protect his son's future. My chest burned with indignation. "You should transfer one of those apartments to Vanessa's name," my father chimed in, as if he were suggesting the most reasonable financial planning in the world. "What do you need 2 investment properties for, anyway? And we could use some help with our retirement planning too," he said. I stood up slowly, my hands clenched into fists at my sides, rage and grief colliding inside me like storm fronts. "Are you serious right now? You skip Jonathan's funeral for a networking event, ignore me and Oliver for 10 days, then show up uninvited to his will reading to demand his property? Now, Abigail," my father started, his tone condescending, his hands raised in a placating gesture that only infuriated me more. "There's no need to be selfish. You're alone now, but you have all this wealth. The family needs to support each other through a sustainable economic model," he said. "Selfish?" I repeated, my voice rising as heat flushed my face. "I'm not alone. I have Oliver, and everything Jonathan left is for his son's future. Every penny will go to making sure Oliver has the best education, the best opportunities, the best life his father can no longer be here to provide." I watched as my parents and sister exchanged glances, their eyes flickering to Oliver's bedroom upstairs with something that looked disturbingly like resentment. The calculation in their gaze made my blood run cold. "You're being ridiculous," my mother snapped, tapping her manicured nails against her designer purse. "Vanessa needs help now for her career advancement, not some child who won't even go to college for years. He's too young to understand the value of these assets anyway," she said. "Some child is your grandson," Walter interjected, his voice tight with anger, the retired architect's normally calm demeanor completely gone. "And his father just died after a 2.5-year battle with cancer," he added. My mother's face flushed with anger. "Don't you dare tell me how to treat my own grandson," she snapped at Walter, her voice rising. "We've been in this family longer than you have. We understand what's best for everyone's long-term interests. And yet you've shown remarkably little interest in being part of it," Marion replied coldly, her years as a teacher evident in her tone that brooked no argument. "That's enough," I said firmly, my patience finally snapping. "Oliver, can you go upstairs to your room for a little while? Take Mr. Harrison with you to show him your model airplanes that you and Dad built together," I said to Oliver. The lawyer, clearly relieved to escape the family drama, quickly stood and took Oliver's hand. "I'd love to see your collection, young man. Your father mentioned you have quite the eye for detail," he said to Oliver. Once they were out of earshot, I turned to my parents and sister, no longer holding back, fury burning away my usual restraint. "How dare you come into my house days after my husband's funeral that you couldn't be bothered to attend and demand his money? Jonathan worked his entire life to build his company and provide for me and Oliver. He battled cancer for 2.5 years, and in all that time, what help did you offer? None. You wouldn't even watch Oliver for a few hours," I said angrily. "That's not fair," my father began, adjusting his expensive watch, but I cut him off. "No, what's not fair is that Jonathan spent thousands of dollars fixing your roof when it collapsed during that storm 3 years ago. What's not fair is that he paid for Vanessa's entire college education at that prestigious university she's always bragging about on social media when you claimed you couldn't afford it. Well, let me make something perfectly clear, I will not be giving any of Jonathan's money or property to you. Not now, not ever. Every penny will go to supporting Oliver and securing his future. That's what Jonathan wanted, and that's what will happen." My mother's face contorted with rage, her carefully maintained facade crumbling. "You ungrateful brat. After everything we've done for you," she shouted. "What exactly have you done for me, Mom? Name one thing." "One single act of selfless parenting," I said back. She opened and closed her mouth, unable to come up with an answer, her perfectly manicured nails digging into her designer purse. "That's what I thought," I said quietly, my voice steadier than I felt inside. "I think it's time for you all to leave." The door slammed behind them, and I collapsed onto the couch, exhausted. "You did the right thing," Walter said gently but firmly from Jonathan's chair. "Did I?" "They're still my parents, and Vanessa's still my sister," I whispered, guilt creeping in despite everything. "Biology doesn't make family," Marion said, taking my hand. "Love makes family. Showing up makes family. Being there when it matters makes family." I nodded, knowing she was right but still feeling the familiar ache of rejection. Later that night, after they'd gone and Oliver was asleep, I found my mother had tagged me in a Facebook post. "Heartbroken that my eldest daughter has become so greedy after her husband's death, refusing to help her struggling sister despite having 2 apartments and plenty of money." Comments poured in from people who only knew her twisted version of events. Anger surged through me, hot and clarifying. This was a new low, using social pressure to shame me into giving them Jonathan's money. I began typing, determined to share the unedited truth with evidence attached. "I've been silent until now, but since my mother has made our private matters public, I must respond with the facts. 10 days ago, we buried my husband Jonathan after his 2.5-year battle with stomach cancer. My parents and sister skipped his funeral for a networking event. I have their text messages as proof. Jonathan helped them financially for years, paying $32,000 for home repairs and funding my sister's expensive education. When I needed help during his illness, they were too busy with spa appointments. Yesterday, they showed up uninvited to the will reading and demanded I give one of our rental properties to my sister because she needs it more than some child. That a child is their 8-year-old grandson who just lost his father. I'm sharing this because I'm tired of being painted as the villain. Jonathan's assets will go to our son's education, as he intended." I attached screenshots of their messages, then pressed post. Within minutes, comments on my mother's post changed. "Patricia, you skipped your son-in-law's funeral for a networking event? Those spa appointment excuses are appalling. I can't believe you'd expect Abigail to give away property meant for her son. How could a social media event be more important than a funeral? Disgusting. Calls and messages flooded in all evening from people shocked at my parents' behavior and offering support. My mother claimed I was manipulating the situation, but the screenshots were undeniable. She eventually deleted her post, but the damage was done. I woke to dozens of missed calls from my parents and Vanessa, which I blocked without listening to. For weeks they tried contacting me by emails begging forgiveness while asking for money, messages through friends suggesting family healing, even bringing gifts for Oliver that matched the price of items they wanted. I remained firm in my decision to protect my son. They're never going to change, are they? I asked Marion as we watched Oliver fly his model airplane. People rarely do fundamentally, she replied honestly. It's strange. I always needed their approval, spent my life trying to earn it, but now, I stopped saying in the middle. Now you recognize your worth, she finished, and you see that Oliver deserves better than that cycle of seeking validation that never comes. 8 months after Jonathan's death, life had settled into a new normal. Marion and Walter continued to be fixtures in our lives, joining us for Sunday dinners and helping with Oliver's school activities. I had started managing the rental properties Jonathan had left us, finding unexpected satisfaction in the work. The downtown apartments provided steady income that supplemented Oliver's education fund. I invested some money in technology companies Jonathan had believed in, watching as the dividends rolled in from his choices. I'd started a small nonprofit inspired by his vision, supporting technology education for underprivileged children. As for my parents and Vanessa, I occasionally heard they were struggling financially. Vanessa had lost her marketing job, and my parents faced retirement costs and home repairs. My responsibility is to my son and honoring Jonathan's wishes. Some called me cold or unforgiving. Maybe I was. But seeing Oliver grow happier each day, building model airplanes and talking about becoming an engineer like his dad, I knew I'd made the right choice. One evening, as I tucked him into bed, he asked, "Mom, do you ever miss Grandma Patricia and Grandpa Henry?" I paused before answering honestly. I miss the relationship I wish we'd had, but not the one we actually had. He nodded, understanding more than a child should. I'm glad we have Grandma Marion and Grandpa Walter. They come to my school events, and Grandpa helps with my planes, he said with smile. Me too. Me too, I whispered, grateful for our chosen family. Some people would never understand cutting ties with birth family. They hadn't experienced the constant disappointment and pattern of favoritism I had. I'd broken the cycle of seeking approval that never came. Oliver would grow up knowing his worth, surrounded by people showing love through actions, not words, people who showed up when needed without conditions. That was Jonathan's greatest legacy, the example of what real family means.